Hi, this is Philip Steiger again at thebest3d.com, and continuing another little example of some of the stuff you'll be able to do pretty soon with PD particles. Actually, the newest version 9, and we call it Particle 9. It's a very small element and a very light edition of Dog Waffle, but it's heading in a direction with some new features that you will also see probably in the future with Howler and PD Artist. And so there are a lot of commonalities, and there's also some new interface design ideas. You've seen probably some of the other demos or videos already. And so some of these are not quite implemented yet. You see there's a couple of nature and stump brushes that are not quite up yet. This one here now that's just recently added. And so we have some, let me see, some undo. And really what I wanted to do is really just to experiment with these a little bit and share that with you so you can see perhaps where this is going. There's some light wash. And in fact, some of the brushes, like the nature brushes with particles and foliage, not implemented here yet. That's still a work under development, but we do have another way to access them, and that is with the browser. So if you browse the media here, click on that, you'll see that there are a number of categories with some basic tools and effects and fractal images, gouache, oils, some gooey paint. Why am I doing this in black and white? Let's get some color here. Something like this here. So you definitely will be able to do a lot of different effects, brushes here, or styles, stickers also with some predefined images from Michel Agulot, the 3D sticker collection. Let's see, some unique stuff. I don't know what unique means, but some rather interesting ones that you might use perhaps for some smoke or fire effect, bubbly stuff, all sorts of weird stuff, some brushes there's some cartoon style smoke. But also the particles, so there's a collection of particle brushes here, and all sorts of fancy effects with that, and the bristles here too, some presets for those. And here's an interesting little one. You see this little thing animated on your browser, or on your cursor, attached to your cursor, so you kind of see how big that thing is going to go as you use it. I thought that was kind of unique. There's the particles, and then there's also some foliage brushes. Now I don't expose them here yet, so we'll see if we can access them in another place. There's also the tools here, and when you right click them, that also will expose some of the brushes. Again, the particle brushes here, and those are the single rule particles. So you have winter branches. For instance, you could use that to start with something like a basic tone, let's say oil, large cover, and give it something like a bluish tint for the nice blue sky, get a little bit more into the whitish tint here, and then eventually down to earth colors down below the horizon line, maybe even a little bit of green, and put some of that in there, maybe on top of the mountains. Actually, let's go and undo this a little bit. And so we may have a little bit of green down in the valley and a little bit of green here with the forests to the side. So that's just the basic tone. You might want to filter that a little bit, blur it. Right? There's a focus blur, like a Gaussian blur, to just say, well, I don't really need to see it crispy. Something like that will be a good start. And now you start with the particle brushes. Right? So you go right-click here and perhaps collect or choose one of the particle brushes, go all the way down here for winter branches that are going to go far away, and then add some others, like what was it, the grass, the paddy grass, and make sure you pronounce that G there and the R. Spell it out loud. So we have serious grass, we have some other types of grass. There's all sorts of weeds and bushes, and let's see what else. Particles. There's just plain grass. And so, you know, you can play with that, but at some point you'll say, oh, I wish I could do some full trees as well. So there's definitely some other ways to pull some more. If you look at settings here in the context bar, that's when you're using the brush. Settings will give you a general collection of settings for most brushes. The anti-aliased pen, the internal brushes and custom brushes based on large images potentially. And so something like that will not get you the particles, but there's another collection here, settings for the particle panels. So this one here is where you will see a few choices. There's the particles we've just seen. Those you can load the presets, including the batty grass I mentioned. Here you go. And you know, maybe you want to use that as a basis and change some of the parameters. Maybe you want it to shoot higher, or you know, have initial velocity a little bit stronger, so that they go up in the foreground now, right? Or maybe you want it finer, so you change the size. Actually, you need to change the style here first, from regular line to shrinking lines, and then you can go change the size to be much thinner. Let's go and undo both of these a little bit and just put a little bit in the front and a little bit down here. Maybe a different tint as well, or a different you know, gradient altogether. So you have all sorts of different effects you can get with that. And now let's talk about trees. So there's bristles here as well. You notice right now I'm on the particle panel here. Bristles, orbitals, those are those fancy rotating ones that do this really funky stuff. And that's a category of itself. And now here we have the foliage brushes. So when you enable those, it's kind of having 10 of the particle brushes, right? There's a whole collection of particle settings here, or parameters, and in the foliage you have up to 10 for one configuration, one setting. And that's what you see when you click down here on Rules Library. It defines the rules for that particular selection that you have right now. Let's first see what that looks like, by the way. When you paint it, it draws a tree, and then does actually potentially some self-shading also. So if you draw again another one, it might get darker here, especially where it's very dense, where there's a lot of brushes, a lot of twigs and branches covering themselves. So it's doing ambient occlusion based self-shading. And that's what you see here in the settings. There are some options like shadows, and if you take that off, then it's just not doing that. It's a little bit faster, but it stays at the original brightness. Right, so you can turn that on, and most brushes will have that now inside this collection. Let's go and do something here. I want to use this as a basic image to work from, and do a variety of changes to it, and then go back to it. So one thing that would be really useful is to kind of have a snapshot of that. I think under the view menu, or let's see, maybe under image is where we can store it. So here is some information on the current image dimensions. You can resample it to change it. You can also do a spare image here. You can copy to, that's a swap image in other versions, like in Howler or in PDArtist. The spare image, as we call it here, basically you can switch back and forth to that and jump to it. Or you can also copy this image to the swap, to the spare image. Then there is copying this into the clipboard. That's actually a quick way to get a snapshot, you know, just in case you need to then paste it over to another image program or whatnot, or insert it into a document of some sort. And so that's one thing here, but we're not going to store that image. Looks like that's reserved for the higher end PD Particle, or PDArtist and Howler edition. But that's okay. We'll just work with that and use the undo level to get back to this if we need to try a different tree, right? So here we go. Let's undo and experiment with those trees, those settings. So load one of the presets, and I'm gonna go perhaps some of the classic trees, or let's see, there's the weed painters. Let's see. So with that, you can quickly put a couple of additional bad tufts of grass there. Let's look for another one. There's some other weeds. All right, so these here will have a full tree growing, or bushes with branches and a variety of leaves and sometimes flowers. I think there's one with snow on top or something like that. Let's see, snow on the mountain tops. There you go. So you see, it's doing quite a bit of things here to start with thick branches, go into thin branches and twigs, go into some green leaves, and then even some white and blue colors. And so that's all a function of the rules that we set up for those. So right, if you look at the rules library here, you can see there's a slider at the top that defines up to 10 rules. Now, not all of them are actually used, but you can see here it stops at 8. So the one before that, rule number 7, says that at the time of splitting there is no branch. Whereas other options could be that yeah, it continues and it splits or it branches into something else, and that would be another rule behind it. The prior one here, for instance, has that something may split or something may branch or something may end. You see that changing here from one case to another. So there will be scenarios where something can go from a big branch to a thinner branch, but maybe with different color or different thickness or other age-dependent decrementing of or change of the size, or decrease this parameter with age. Also the lifespan, basically. There's all sorts of different parameters that affect the look of these bushes and trees and simple trees. Let's see, for instance, here, that one's indeed a very simple one. Let's go and undo here so we get a clearer look. And some of this will also follow the mouse, right? So these are some of the settings that you'll see there, that the rules allow you to have. Let's see, ligustrum. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, that's an interesting little bush here in the foreground. You see that self-shading again, the ambient occlusion. Let's see some other evergreens. There's lots of evergreens here, and depending on how quickly you draw here, you'll see some big ones or some small ones. Lots of different ways to put this to good use inside of this composition. Let's try perhaps another cactus branch, some branches also. Sometimes you don't need the full tree, but just something little in the foreground. Right. So that's some more ideas about what you'll be able to do in PD Particle or PD Particle 9. There are certainly a few more things to explore, and one thing perhaps I wanted to do is just take a look at a few more of these items here on the left side in the tool panel, because we have a pretty full gamut of tools here, kind of similar, actually very much the same that you have in PD Artist or in PD Howler. So you have the brush tool with most of these brushes directly accessible here, like some rake tools, some rake brushes, and there's always room to change those as well. These are presets that you can use to start from, and there are some effects like modeling clay. There are also then some additional changes you can make to that with the settings. Right there, if you pin this one down, you'll have some settings, for instance, for the FX brushes, some additional post FX to give it a bit more of a gel-like or impasto appearance, and then also gouache or translucent watercolor. And especially with the translucent watercolor, I like to point out the pigment lifting. So you have some lifting here that you can bring up, and that will, you see how it's after your brush stroke is done. Maybe I got too much here. Let's go and reduce this a little bit. You can see how it's kind of blending and blurring it. Let me go one brush stroke across here and notice what happens to the image behind it. Let's say here, look at the twigs here from the winter branches, the dark ones. I'm going over that, and you see how it's kind of blurring those. So lots of different ways to use that. Perhaps reduce the pigment, so the only thing it does is actually blurring it. Right, so this is sort of a generic blur brush at that point. And you can use that to blur a little bit and just reduce the amount of pigment lifting. And now you have a very tiny little bit of blur, but every time you go over that, it blurs it some more. Right? So let's say you needed a little bit of blurring just in this area. You can go over that like this, and you say, let's do it some more, and go a few times more over that. And it's not doing much in terms of changing the hue, it's just blurring it because of the pigment lifting. And that's some of the really fun stuff you can do with this. So that those are the brushes. You have brush tools here. There's a fill tool as well, right? So you can fill with fill settings such as plain color fill in different modes, and then you'll be able to also use some patterns. So there are some predefined patterns, and you can You can see what those look like. These are typically tileable or seamless, so they can repeat and tile. And there's quite a collection of different styles. And then you can use that as pattern fill or warp it into a particular shape, and perhaps use it in a multiply mode with a little bit of tolerance, so or change in opacity, and there's all sorts of other parameters to that. So here's a tolerance for the fill, and then so when you click that, you can see how this basically applies that wicker basket appearance to the image, right? So you can apply that a few times. Fill tool, there's a linear tool also, and the linear tool will take the existing brush. So now this particular brush is that current wicker basket in the brush as a single image. If you go back to some other preset brush, let's say we had, what did we have in the oils here, the totally oils. If you paint with that, that's one thing. If you use the line tool or the linear tool here, it's applying that same thing across that particular thing here. So let's say you go and render, I don't know, a filter and render a grid pattern or a brick texture, for instance, something like that. Right? So you have some sort of a brick pattern, and you want to perhaps make it a little bit darker. There you go, something like that. You have the mortar, and you want to just go across that with this strange brush along this line. So that's what you use the linear tool for. And then so whatever brush you actually choose, some of these brushes contain images, as we've seen. I think I have a cartoony collection here, something like this. So if I paint with that, that's one thing. If I use the linear tool with that, it's basically putting it along that line with a bit of randomness to it, right? That really depends on all sorts of parameters in the lines or in the brush. Let's go and see some of my favorites. There's some Boingly, these balls here, these beach balls. So if I go back to that original here, I can certainly use the linear tool here again, and these beach balls will line up. There's another tool here that we've seen already in a prior video. This one is the curve tool, and the curve tool is extremely powerful too. You click a couple of points, and after 4 points and more, it starts doing a spline interpolation. So you can do all sorts of interesting complex shapes. You can close it simply by clicking the first point again. You can add new points, right? Just click and drag and add additional points. And then what you do with that shape is really a function of what you like to see happen with it. You can have it first of all in a catmull, interpolate through these points that you entered, or in a B-spline, which uses sort of a scaffolding container, and it goes through the midpoints and the tangents, but you can still add points there as well. And so let's say you design a boomerang or whatever this thing might be, and you want to draw the brush again along that. So you choose the brush that you want. Let's say this time we'll take also a thick oil, or maybe something else. Let's see, something with shapes there, flowers. Let's get organic shape, flowery. That normally looks like this, right? So if you undo that, or even keep it here on the side, why not? And then you go back to that curve tool. It still has that most recently introduced curve, and you can now render the brush along that. So there's a couple of ways to work with the brushes. Right here you see to define, work with the points and delete them, move them, and so on, start all over. And then there is ways to actually use that and say you want it interpolated, or you want it smoothed, or you want to open it, and you want it also now finish it. So there's a couple of tools here, couple of options to finish, to for instance stroke the brush along that path. And so you see now these flowers going along that path. And so that's one of the fun things you can do, is to create all sorts of shapes, maybe by tracing an existing image, right? And then that shape can be used to re-render a brush stroke along it. And that brush stroke can even simulate the presence of a tablet, right? So for instance, if you do something like this here, you draw something like a shape like that, or even something a little bit simpler. Let's go and do something like this. You know how if you draw this with the mouse, it's typically going to look like something like this here, right? It's not going to have a change in in thickness or in line width. With a brush stroke on a tablet, though, if you have, when you think about the tip of the tablet, the more pressure you apply, the more it's going to control the size of this. And so we can simulate that even with actually using a mouse. And I'm going to show it right here. This one here is to not simulate the tablet, so this is basically stroke a brush along the path. And then this one here is to paint a brush, which does basically look a little bit more like a tablet was used. And you see here it's very light and gradually increases to full intensity and then comes back down to very light. That affects the density, the transparency, or the size, all of the above. And so you can use that to do all sorts of effects that kind of look like a tablet was actually being used to paint that. So for instance, one thing that you can do also with this line tool is to actually draw a couple of points and automatically on the fly have it rendered. So you have the auto mode here, right? So you have automatically stroke a path the moment you're done with the freehand mode on the tools. So the freehand mode is right over here. Right. If you don't use the freehand mode, you're currently in that insert point mode. It's not going to do the automatic. It's going to wait for you to keep adding points. But if you do the freehand mode, you draw a point like this, and at the end it automatically goes to draw that, or not. I mean, you can also uncheck that, and then all it does is just draws a curve, kind of in a freehand mode. But the beauty of that is that you can use that to also automatically draw or to stroke a brush. So you can do a draw mode, which will be what you expect from a mouse. And then here I'm still using the mouse, but it's going to look a little bit more like you had actually a tablet with pressure sensitive behavior. And it's a bit difficult to notice, to really see it here. So let me switch back to a different brush, like a simple brush, right? If you do a simple brush, something like this here, with perhaps the size a little bit higher, the maximum size, there you go. And now you go with that the curve tool, and you are still in this mode where you if you do an automatic paint, it's like this. It keeps that default size, but if you go the automatically painted, then now it's doing something that's a little bit more indicative or similar to what you might see on when using a tablet. So keep in mind that the size here is the maximum size you'll see, so use that as a reference. And then you can do all sorts of funky stuff in styles. Let's say you do little sketches here, some big ears, and well, maybe that's not it. Let's undo that. Let's go something like this, and we have a little troll here, and I don't know, we need a nose. We need some eyebrows, and something like this here. And you can see how this was not done with a tablet, but it does have a little bit of a tablet-y feel to it. And look, because it changes automatically what the size of these lines are. So I thought that's an interesting tool to explore as well. So let's keep on here reviewing some of the tools that you'll see. There is also a gradient collection. Actually, this one has a lot of really fun tools. It has a linear gradient, and with the linear gradient you can go over the current image and totally erase it. That depends really on what the gradient does, because with the gradients there are lots of presets, and some of them are fully opaque, but some of them will be transparent at times. So if you look at the linear, if you look at the gradients, and then down here there's a gradient editor and the sweep editor. That's my favorite. Go to the sweep editor. Trust me on that. That's really the fun one to use. From left to right is what defines your gradient. So let's say you go to one of those. There's 8 presets to choose from, but there are a number of groups of presets. So you can load here quite a number of different presets. Some of them are known as picture frames. Some of them are for gun medals. Those are probably going to be useful for you guys in the game development world if you want something that looks a little bit like gun medals, like reflective surfaces from an environment with some sky colors showing in the reflection. But let's say you want to make some of that transparent. Right now we have the value, we have the red, the green, and the blue. Let's not change the value or the colors, but let's change the opacity. So right now it's fully opaque. Well, if you were to go down here, it would be transparent and then opaque again. So now you can do a gradient that does look like it's a little bit see-through in the middle, right? And you can do that to more extreme, or you can do the other way. You can make it fully opaque at the top and then drop down to fully transparent on the sides. Even smooth this here, keep and press, hold, hold this down, so you now have a gradient that that is fully transparent on the edges. And if you go to different gradients, some of these will really look very interesting when you do that. One thing you can do is actually have that transparency here all over, so you have a sort of a pattern or a grid of transparent elements showing. So you see how this can become very sophisticated very quickly. And the next thing you'll probably want to do is branch into a different type of gradient. And we have that circular gradient here too, so you can use that. You can do all sorts of other things, gradient modes, right? You can say, let's do an XOR mode, and that creates havoc. So there is definitely a lot of confusion to be had with this here. Gradient modes, linear gradient grabber tool, right? Maybe you created an interesting pattern and combination of chaos here, and you'd like to pick this back up as a new gradient. Let's say you want to go from this upper left to the lower right and pick up any colors that you see here automatically into a new gradient. So the linear the gradient grabber, the GG, right click this here and say linear gradient grabber tool. You click and drag, and as you grab, it's going to find the colors along that path and pick them. Right? Let go. Boom, you now have that all in here. There's a lot of other tools in here. There's the warp tool. The warp tool, really fun to warp and displace this entire concoction here. You have all sorts of really fancy stuff you can create with that. There is also, let's see what else we have here, the Nova tool. So with that you create a couple of bright spots. There's a medium bloom, a large bloom, so many number of lines, and then even more sophisticated in terms of appearance. The Nova tool, there's a couple of presets, but there's the lens flares. Right, so with the lens flares, oh my God, look at that! You have tons of really beautiful effects here with this. And so if you just needed to add a lens flare to that image, we had initially rendered painted this image. Let me see if I can undo that. Or really, actually, I saved it. Remember, I saved it here or on the image. I had saved it into the clipboard. Let's paste from the clipboard and replace the current image. There it is again. Right, it was still in the clipboard. So now I can add my sunset there, or one sun right there. And then perhaps get something like a red star over here, or maybe Venus or some other planet, some other moon, and add a little bit of mystic magic to that as well. There's an additional lens flare here. So that's definitely a fun part to also explore. There's also a lightning tool. And so some of these will be hopefully really of value. There's some text tool. There's a rectangle tool. You can do, now that one's split into two tools. So you actually see an icon that's split half. Same with the oval, the circle here. You can do the upper left. If you click it in the upper left, it's a hollow rectangle, right, with whatever the current brush is. And if you use the lower right part, it's filling it with whatever the current brush is. So if you have an image of these beach balls still in there, it will use that, and you may have some other effects there as well. So that same thing with the oval. You have the hollow oval that's not using any, that's using the brush but not doing any filled area, and then you have the lower right corner that can fill it. Right, so let's go clear that, and you can see this fill effect with the oval. Now there's a few more. There's a bunch of tools here for selections. So the alpha channel, if you want, that's the selection menu that you see here. Not so much a menu really. We don't do menus on these except for the very file menu. But you have mostly sort of a context bar here for each of those items. So there's selection options, and there's color picker. What's this one here? So you'll see tooltips also. That's a custom brush selector tool, right? So with the custom brush selector, you get to pick a portion of your existing image and make that your brush. So now you can go and actually paint with that. Right, so that is now the current image, the image in the current brush. For instance, if you had that other image in the clipboard and you wanted to take a portion of that into your brush, you can go paste the clipboard again, and say, for instance, you wanted this part with this brush and a portion of it with the grass, or maybe something a little bit different. You wanted to pick this thing up. You can go and simply use the custom brush pickup tool, and say, for instance, let's pick up this portion here. And so now you have picked that up as a brush, and you can paint with that. And that's really something that you usually use together with a selection around it, right? So let's say you want to have a portion of this grass here, or a portion of this these twigs and branches. What you probably will want to do is use the selection tool first, ellipse to alpha, and kind of do a selection like this, or perhaps a selection like this. And this actually gives you access to sort of a selection tool that's a little bit more sophisticated, and you can use that to do all sorts of transforms as well, or give it a bit more sophisticated shape identification here, and then you have a right click to do a variety of things, like including actually to transform it. You can apply a transform to that selected area. So there's all sorts of effects, but let's go back to the actual selection and apply. Let's see. I don't think we hit enter here. We just apply transform. So we have not applied a transform in this case. We have actually just made that selection, and we can now go and smooth that selection a little bit, blur it. So under the selection menu, you'll see some options to work with special effects on the selection, not on the image, but on the selection. You might want to show it as a color overlay. In color overlay, it will give you kind of a pink tint. It will tint it to a pink color if it's not selected, and then you have the selected part still showing at plain color. And or you can also turn the marching ants off. Right? You see marching ants or color. Or both. You can have the marching ants turned off if that takes too much time, or if it's distracting, and then you have also the color. And so in this mode, you can see when you apply the blur, it's easy to see that's actually blurring the selection, because now you have a selection that's gradually transitioning. Right? You see the normal tinting, the pink appearance for the pixels that are not selected. You see still the plain color inside, but then you see a transition. It's not such a crisp transition anymore, right? Because before that, if I undo that, you see how this was a crisp transition. And whether you have the marching ants in the middle or not doesn't make a difference. If you do a blur here, you can see that you have a smooth transition. You still have the marching ants in the middle. The marching ants are simply showing where is the 50% transition, the demarcation line, I like to call it. So you have a smooth transition of the selection, and it's fully selected inside, fully non-selected outside, and then there is a transition obviously happening, and the marching ants are showing where that is at the 50%, at the half level. There's a variety of things you can do, by the way, with the selection. You can drop a shadow and do all sorts of funky stuff with that as well. You can also do some. You can grow the selection. You can add some glow. You can emboss, and you can even say, "Let's go paint on it." So you kind of toggle to that, and you basically paint right on that. But when you're done, then you click this thing, and you revert back to the regular painting. But if you made any changes to that painting in the selection, it would be now applied as a selection. So there's actually an interesting use for that, and that's when you click on paint to go to that mode, and you notice here paint on alpha mode is active. You can go now and paint with regular brushes, and the intent is, for instance, to use an airbrush here, and you can paint with that. And you can paint with one color or the other, whatever you have in the primary and the secondary color, with left button and with right button. And then when you click out of that, it has now used those pixels that you painted. It uses that as the alpha channel. Right? So you can actually you can paint into the alpha directly as well. And that's not the only way you can do it, but that was one convenient way. right here. Let's go and undo that and go back to our prior selection we had here. And I wanted to pick this up, right, as a custom brush. You also have the control key, and you can shift around if you wanted to further refine where exactly to place it. Right, so you have the smooth tool on the blur tool here on the selection to make it a smooth transition, and then you have some additional repositioning options to say what part you actually want to aim with it. And then once you have that, what I would simply do is pick this up as a custom brush. Right? So when you look at the brush, you have an option here to pick up selected. This will pick up the whole image or whatever the selection is. In this case we have a selection, and we'll pick this up as a custom brush. Right? And then you may want to store the brush, and you see here indeed it is fully opaque on the inside and showing you the area that was selected, and everything around it is transparent. So that's a quick way to make your own brush and actually start painting with it. And you can open the eye here to enable the preview with the custom brush. It is somewhat transparent here. Let's increase the opacity to the max. So now you actually have this to paint with. Right? So you can start something totally new with that. Using this as a custom brush. So that's some of the tricks with the custom brush pickup tool. There's a few more things here, obviously the turkey baster or color picker. This one here you click and drag to move around. This one here you click and drag to zoom in and zoom out, but you can also use the shift and control. If you wait, let me turn this preview of the brush off. You can use the control and shift key, and with the left button it moves around, with the right button zooms in. If you have a 3-button mouse, or rather a thumb wheel on your mouse, you can use that to zoom in as well, and some of that can be configured to different actions. There's a 100% reset, there's a expand fitted into the screen. If the window is too big to fit, this is a quick shortcut. There's the undo. You use that a few times. Right click to redo, go forward in history. You have a right click to erase different things here. You can erase to primary color. You can erase, you can right click to erase to secondary color. And then there's also to erase to black or white. So there's primary colors and primary and secondary color, but then also black and white. And then there's also a switch here of what is the primary and the secondary color. You can click that and say, well, I want it to go dark blue. And so now when you erase now to the secondary color, you erase to dark blue. And that's what it does here. Also, if you just left click on that. So this quick walkthrough, hopefully useful to just get an idea of how that's going to be different from the very old original PD Particle. PD Particles 1. Many years ago we designed it, and it's outdated. It's time for an overhaul, and that's what this is going to look like. Particle 9 with quite a bit more advanced engine behind it, and still also some of the other tools that were in PD Particles 1. Remember we had the filters, a few filters. This actually has more, and there's also combinations and renders and other things you can do here. There's some predefined filters, the Mandelbrot. The thing is, there's also a couple of other items that you can find. Let's see, I think it would probably be on the filter, some additionals, maybe combine or maybe render. Let me think, or maybe just keyboard shortcut K. Let's see, K for the killer plugin. Maybe I need to be in here first, keyboard focus, and there it is. So there's a killer plugins, we used to call them, K for killer plugins, and it shows what filters are there: input, output, brush, and miscellaneous. And so with the miscellaneous, there's a couple of fun things too. There's a clock. I think one of them is working in a very odd way on Halloween. Not this one. This one's not the Halloween brush clock. But there's also a couple of other things to experiment with here, and Penny is one of them. So I wanted to finish with Penny. Penny Paint is another paint program. It's its own thing, right? You got the paint program, you thought, and you were right, but you got another one with that. Now you double click that, and what it does is it brings up a different interface. And a very simple one. This is all you have: 4 tools, 4 brushes, right? Now it starts with the current image that you already had down there in the main program, but what you can do is you can use that now to just paint fresh, and use these brushes and there'll be just very quick dabbles. This is a sort of for sketching, very quick sketching, and perhaps a few interesting styles effects as well. There's a paper texture you can see, and that's about it. It's very simple, but straight to the point. And for some drawing artists, this is pretty fun. This is a nice little spline-based paint engine or drawing engine, and we encourage you to play with that as well and give us some feedback. See if you like it. Maybe we can further develop this as well. So now what happens when you're done with that, you can either say, well, I want to send this to Dog Waffle. I want to get the current image from Dog Waffle. That's still down here, right, in Particle 9. But instead of doing that, you want to send it back there. Right? This image you just drew there, you want to send it back. So you can do an undo. You cannot do a redo in this implementation. So yeah, it's a simple paint program. What can I say? Simple drawing. But this was at one point sort of an experimental thing, and it's still available. So I wanted to point that out. Now, when you erase or get out of the program by clicking here, before it actually kills this, it will send the image into here. Right. So check this. If I click here, boom, you now have it here. So now you can go and go back to doing what you do. Right, this is where you are back in Particle, and do your painting and do some other things with it. All right, so thanks for watching. I hope this was not too long, and just wanted to keep you a bit more informed about how this is progressing. As I mentioned, we do have a few new presets here, and one thing that we'll do is we'll keep you informed as soon as we have the stumps and some more nature presets here implemented. We'll show you that as well, coming up soon in a future recording. So thanks for watching. This is Philip Steiger at thebest3d.com, and I invite you to keep an eye on that, and we'll talk to you soon.